episode of 20th Century Dude. Today I'm going to be showing you my LaserDisc video collection, which is something I apparently forgot to do last month, but now I'm finally getting around to it. So this is one of many disc formats I obviously own. I'm sure a lot of people own DVDs and Blu-rays, but also previously before I showed you the CEDs, and now I'm moving on to the laser video disc, which is pretty funny to think that this is actually released before CED. This was released in 1978, while CED was released in 1981. You would have thought that the dates would have been switched because of the hardware running it. You would have thought that the one reading off the vinyl video would have been older than the one reading off a LaserDisc. LaserDisc beat CED, so the rest is basically history. I think because it managed to get somewhat of a head start, that sort of helped in LaserDisc's favor. So I got about, I think, maybe 24 or so of these movies so far on the format. And of course, likely to expand soon. I'd like to get maybe some Star Trek content on there. I know I want to get the original trilogy of movies as well as the Phantom Menace on LaserDisc, since the Phantom Menace was the only prequel release on the format. It's sort of a shame that LaserDisc died before the prequels were finished, because had they been finished, I totally would have been after Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith on the format as well. Though, of course, I also would have preferred if LaserDisc just stuck around anyway. But, of course, DVD happened, and, well, one of those has got to go, I guess. So, starting off, we have Top Secret, a movie from the people who made Airplane, and I believe The Naked Gun as well. While it's not my favorite from them, I do like what they tried to do with this movie. It is pretty quirky, it is pretty funny. I believe it's also one of Jay's favorite movies from Red Letter Media. And I think they did a video on it, which I haven't watched yet. So that's Top Secret. And up next we have Tommy Boy. And, well, if it has Chris Farley in it, then you'll know you'll be in for pretty much a hoot of a time. This is one of the few films where Chris Farley teamed up with David Spade. I know another one was Black Sheep, which was okay, but it wasn't as good as Tommy Boy. I don't recall if they did another one or not off the top of my head, but this is probably the most famous one that they've ever done. And honestly, a duo I think would have worked perfectly had the both of them survive would have been Chris Farley and John Candy. And then maybe Chris Farley plays like John Candy's younger brother or something in a movie. I think having the both of them together would have been most excellent. Unfortunately, the both of them passed away, I think from some health issues. So that's something that never really came to pass, which is a shame because I really would have loved to have seen that in a movie. And then up next we have Tombstone, which is a 90s Western I kind of like. I don't like it for what it is. It's a pretty bulky one. I think it runs over 2 hours, I think. Yeah, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. So it requires the use of a second disc as well. So that was kind of the thing with LaserDisc, was you could fit maybe an hour at most on each side. So if you had like Back to the Future or something, which I'm pretty sure was like almost 2 hours long, but not quite, you can have enough movie space on there to fit on one disc, and you would just have to flip it over when it's halfway done. Although I know there's the CED LaserDisc where it runs on 30 minutes per side, and there would be multiple discs, because you can go back and access like specific frames, which is something you couldn't do on a regular LaserDisc. So that's Tombstone, and that requires a second disc. And more often than not, when you go to flip over to, I guess, the fourth side of the second disc, there's always a turtle telling you there's nothing there, and that you need to like flip it over and whatnot. And up next we have Apocalypse Now. I think the only movie in my LaserDisc collection that I have not seen. I found this last year at like this giant, I guess, flea market sale. Some guy was trying to sell his entire LaserDisc collection as well as his player. I already had a player, so I managed to convince him to just let me have this disc for $10 because he wanted to sell it all in one bundle, but I only wanted the movie. But I eventually said just I'll buy it for $10 if that's fine, and eventually he let me have it. So I still have yet to watch this movie. I know it's one of the most revered, I guess, sound mixes of all time because of Walter Murch's direction. With I think this was also the movie, one of the first movies anyway, where I think they maybe got nominated or were awarded for sound design. Like a sound designer became more of a, I guess, significant position in the movie. Yeah, this is the only one I've not seen yet. Of course, the months go by, and every single time it's like, I'm finally going to get around to watching the movie. I'm finally going to get around to watching the movie. And I just never do. What's also nice about this is, like, some LaserDisc sets, there's more information inside. You can open it up sort of like a book. I think the definitive collection of the Star Wars trilogy has a literal book in the packaging. So yeah, that's Apocalypse Now. And one thing I find kind of odd is when you flip it over to the fourth side, there's just credits. But that's it. So it makes me wonder why they even bother with the fourth side at all. Why they couldn't just keep it all on side 3 is beyond me. It's a 2.5-hour film, it looks like. So I'm guessing maybe it's 50 to 60 minutes per side. So you could have done away with side 4, but then again, what do I know? I mean, it's not like there's bonus features on there or anything. And up next, we have the James Bond film, You Only Live Twice. This is the 5th one with Sean Connery, and the 5th one in the franchise overall. Honestly, out of all the ones in the 60s, this one's probably my least favorite of the bunch. I don't think it's horrible. All the 60s Bond movies are good. 70s Bond movies for me are a mixed bag. I like movies like Live and Let Die and The Spy Who Loved Me. But I think we could pretty much admit that Moonraker was a pretty silly movie. And then you have The Man with the Golden Gun, which is not one of the more memorable ones in the franchise. 80s especially were a mixed bag, because you had Roger Moore, who wasn't a bad Bond. He just overstayed his welcome, got too old, and maybe a little too silly. And you could just see them kind of slowly, one by one, get worse in the 80s. I mean, I don't think A View to a Kill is going to be one that's truly beloved among fans in the franchise, unless you have like some childhood memories or something with it. And then you have the Timothy Dalton ones, which, compared to the Roger Moore's last few, I think are okay, but it's definitely obvious they wanted to make a big 180, make a big tonal shift as far as they wanted to get across, especially License to Kill. I think License to Kill, it's still Timothy Dalton's best Bond movie out of the 2 he did. But in some ways also, it kind of is more of an 80s action movie than it is a true Bond film. But then again, it depends on your taste and what you're looking for. And up next we have The Time Machine, a sci-fi movie from the 1960s. I think I remember reading the original book in middle school. They happened to have it in the school library, I think, or maybe it was in my English teacher's room or something. I just happened to pick up a copy that happened to be there. So I do remember some things about the book, and I think a lot of it does transfer into the movie. It's a pretty good movie as well. I mean, I don't think anybody would be extremely disappointed with it. I mean, maybe the use of the actual time machine itself compared to all the time travel stories that have been, I guess, done to death in, like, Bill and Ted, Back to the Future, Hot Tub Time Machine, Star Trek, and I guess even Avengers Endgame now. I don't know if there's really any significant consequences, like, or what the rules of time travel are in this movie. It just seems like he can go to the future back and forth whenever he pleases. So I don't know. Maybe this is before like established rules were really a thing for time travel in science fiction, but who knows? That's The Time Machine. It's a pretty good movie. And then up next we have first Top Gun, which, I mean, if we had Maverick back in the day, I would have also loved that on LaserDisc, but fortunately we're about 30 years too late. This is actually one of the first 3 LaserDiscs I ever had before I even got around to having a player. Somebody just happened to be having stacks and stacks and stacks of LaserDiscs at my local, where I live. We have the sale barn, what it's called. It's basically a, I guess, giant, it's full of like produce stands and other flea markets, things just people want to sell. There's even a horse carriage ride that you can take, since, you know, I live in a town where there's Amish, so of course there would be horse carriage rides. And this was one of the first 3. So I only picked 3 to start. I think it was like, I paid $7 for 3 movies. But I only picked ones I've actually seen before. So something like Rambo 3, it was there, and normally I would have picked it up. But at the time of making this video, I've not seen a Rambo movie, at least not the whole way through. And because it's the 3rd one in the series, it makes no sense to start with Rambo 3 when you can just go back and watch First Blood, which is another movie I really just need to get around to. So, here's Top Gun. And up next we have Weekend at Bernie's, another great 80s classic. I'm sure because of how the plot is and the fact that they're literally carrying a dead body around for most of the movie, I can't imagine this is a kind of comedy that would have been done in maybe the 30s, 40s, or even 50s. Maybe it would have been morally wrong. I don't know. But at least if, like, when you get in the 80s and 90s, it'd be more, I guess, socially acceptable, maybe, or maybe just funnier to pull off. But then they made Weekend at Bernie's 2 for some reason. Who even knows? I don't even know what some of these cast members are really doing anymore outside of this movie. I don't think they're super big names on the cast, but I could be wrong. And up next we have the original Westworld, which, not to be confused with the, I think, HBO series. I think continued on. I don't know. Maybe that's a separate entity. But then, yeah, here's the original movie, and I think they also had Future World as well later on. So I kind of like this movie for what it was. It was also interesting to see James Brolin in a movie, not Josh Brolin, who you all know is Thanos. This is his dad, James Brolin. Not to be confused. There's 2 of them apparently. So that's Westworld. And of course, one of the original ones I had in my collection, I mentioned about the first 3 I got. We have National Lampoon's Vacation. And this is my second favorite in the Vacation series. I mean, I think we all know that Christmas Vacation is the best one out of the bunch. I think it's the most revered anyway. European Vacation was okay. I just didn't find it got enough laughs out of me like I would have wanted. Maybe I think it was obviously it was kind of rushed. They rushed to get a sequel out there, and it kind of shows. And Vegas Vacation was also pretty mid. It was just kind of there, I guess. And then there's the Vacation soft reboot, I guess you can call it. with Ed Helms. That one's pretty much a disaster. And the one I haven't seen is, I guess, Christmas Vacation 2, Eddie's Island Adventure, which I think is notoriously called one of the worst movies ever made. But that's one I'm not really in a big hurry to go find. And the last of the ones in the original three is Speed, which is a 90s action movie that some of you may remember, or maybe not remember. But if you want some early Keanu Reeves before The Matrix and before John Wick series, this is a movie for you. And apparently they made Speed 2, I guess, which takes place on a boat. I don't know why, unless it's a jet ski. I can't imagine it'd be a boat that's like super fast. So maybe they should have called the movie Slow. I don't know. I think that title would have made more sense. And up next we have True Lies, which is a James Cameron film from the 90s that maybe some of you remember. Some of you know him from Avatar, some of you remember him from The Terminator. And then there's movies like this that I guess get pushed under the rug. And while it's not my favorite James Cameron movie, I think it's somewhat underrated. But I think it does maybe run a tad bit too long. There are some pacing issues as a result. But I do like the movie. I mean, I don't think it's better than Aliens. I don't think it'd be better than his Terminator stuff. I haven't seen Piranha 2: The Spawning, so I can't really say much of that. But I would even watch this movie over stuff like Titanic, Avatar stuff. He's gone like real Avatar crazy for some reason. It seems like that's all he wants to do anymore. But I think it's kind of one of those things that's like, alright, dude, you can go find something else to do. I think one Avatar was probably enough. And then here it is, one of the first movies I ever remember seeing in my life at, I guess, age 0, you can call it. And actually my favorite movie of all time, the first Toy Story. Which, honestly, without it, I would not be here talking to you right now. I wouldn't have been in film school. Yeah, this is a LaserDisc I knew I wanted to get. This was only one of 2 Pixar movies that was ever released on the LaserDisc format. This is the only one that's been released in English, though. There's also a Bug's Life, but I think I've only seen like maybe Korean copies, French copies, Japanese copies, but not anything in English. So, and the Bug's Life stuff is always some of the more expensive LaserDiscs to get. Whereas this one, I found this one for $10, not even including shipping, which was pretty nice. And for the LaserDisc of Toy Story, it's the only one. It's the only Toy Story on home video that takes directly from the film source rather than the digital source from the original computer. So anything you would have seen on, VHS or DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, streaming, they all take from the original computer files. Not like would have been released on film negatives or film prints released to theaters, which this one does. So the color variety is going to be slightly different from what you've normally been seeing, so I can't wait to watch the movie that way. And up next we have Time Cop. This one's in the 90s, not the 80s, with Jean-Claude Van Damme. So he was a popular action star at once, and this is one of the movies they decided to do. There's some interesting concepts in here with time, and while it isn't my favorite action movie, certainly not my favorite time travel movie, I do like it for what it does try to accomplish. And compare it to Time Machine, which I think which is also a good movie, but with the Time Machine, it just seems like you could just time travel at will. There's no stakes, there's no rules. Whereas in Time Cop, at least they do try to establish some rules, which is good. I do like time travel stories where there are stakes and there are rules. You can't just, I guess, go all over the place. Which I don't recall if there were any rules for Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I mean, I would have thought when you're taking these historical figures out of time, that would have done something to the timeline. But I guess not, because I guess everything's just okay. But yeah, that's Time Cop. And up next we have The Untouchables, which is a movie. After watching it for the first time, I really liked it for what it was. I think it was based on like a TV show from back in the 60s, which I've not seen, which I think was also based on, I don't know if there was a radio show of The Untouchables before. There might have been, and I'm going to have to look again. I think this was also loosely based on events in real life. I mean, obviously, Al Capone, he was a real guy, but I don't think what's presented in the movie should be, I guess, taken as historical fact, which is why I would say yes, it is very loosely based. And again, you get some nice art inside here. And, you know, if you remember when I was talking about CLV and CAV LaserDiscs before, earlier on, the first disc I have, which contains about the first 2/3 of the movie, is what would be described as CLV. So it could fit about almost an hour-ish on each side, and then you'd have to flip it over. And then when you get to the second disc, it goes to CAV, because there's not as much there. And I guess that was when they decided to say, you can access it with the frames on the CAV. So you can only access frames on 1/3 of the entire movie. And then up next we have Total Recall. Paul Verhoeven was the one who made this movie. He also made RoboCop, which is a great 80s movie. He also made Showgirls, which, from what I know, is a very sketchy 90s movie. You either like that movie for what it is, or it's just awful. So I don't know if that's going to be one I'm going to be in a big hurry to see. But this is one he did before Showgirls, and I do like this movie. I don't like it as much as RoboCop, but I do really like this movie and what it was trying to do with the story. And I do like that it's left kind of ambiguous, whether half the movie is in Arnold Schwarzenegger's dream or if it actually happened. So I like that you kind of have to assume what actually happened in the movie. And here's one I watched very recently, was Vanishing Point. This one is sort of a revered classic of sorts from the 1970s. I'm going to go out on a limb here, and honestly, while I did kind of like the movie, I don't say it would be enough to, like, I guess, give it universal praise to death. I know Tarantino loves Vanishing Point. He's made reference to it numerous times. I just maybe don't love it as much as other movies. So that's Vanishing Point. And up next we have some Tom and Jerry cartoons, which was one I was eager to get on LaserDisc. There are a few on here that I've never seen before, so, and I was pretty curious to see what those cartoons were up to. But then there are others on here, like the one, the Mermouse, the Cat Concerto, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Mouse, which I've seen Plenty of times as a kid at my grandparents' house, they had a couple DVDs of Tom and Jerry cartoons, so it's just something I picked up on, like, oh, I know that one. But yeah, but then there's other ones where I just haven't seen them for the first time, and apparently Jerry also has a cousin that is very super strong and really does put Tom in his place because of his super mouse strength. Maybe they should have just used Mighty Mouse. I don't know. And here's some recent purchases. First, in my indie trilogy of LaserDiscs, we got, obviously, Raiders of the Lost Ark, which at this point, it still stands as the best Indiana Jones movie of all time, which I think most people universally agree about, but there are a few that think that Last Crusade is their favorite, and that's okay. I can understand probably why you would think Last Crusade is your favorite. I think it's Dad's favorite, even though he doesn't really pay the most attention to these movies to begin with. I also think, for however they did home video sources back then, I wonder if they just borrowed from the same home video master, because there's a little teaser for Temple of Doom at the beginning of this LaserDisc, and it's the same exact thing on my CED copy of Raiders. So I'm half tempted to wonder if they just, maybe it was a creative decision when making the disc, I don't know, but maybe they just had the same master they went off of, and that's where they got the teaser from. And speaking of Temple of Doom, it's the second one, which apparently is also a prequel, which some people, you'd be surprised how many people still don't know that Temple of Doom is actually a prequel. This one is, I think, in 1935, and Raiders is technically actually in 1936. So if you think about it, it's pretty interesting that Spielberg and George Lucas thought it'd be interesting. Well, let's take it a little back before. I mean, it's sort of a sequel, but not really, because it's actually a prequel. And this is one of the two movies that actually started PG-13. It was that and Gremlins. Because apparently there was stuff in these movies that took it way too far for parents. It wasn't violent enough for an R rating, but it was too hardcore for a PG rating. So I guess if this movie were made today, it would be retroactively PG-13, although PG-13 is thrown at a lot of different movies that really just don't need the rating, so it's still kind of screwed up. The Force Awakens was rated PG-13 for some reason, although I figured it probably could get away with a PG. It'd be fine. If they were willing to give Attack of the Clones a PG, I don't know why they wouldn't give The Force Awakens a PG. That didn't make any sense to me. I think movies like Rogue One and Revenge of the Sith, I mean, obviously those are Star Wars movies that, yeah, it's obvious why those might need a 13 rating, but that's Temple of Doom, and I would say out of the original trilogy of indie movies, this is probably my least favorite, but it's in no way a horrible movie. There's just a couple things in here that I think maybe deem it lesser compared to Last Crusade and Raiders, which obviously are two movies I just happen to like more anyway. But I would also say this is probably my favorite indie soundtrack, though. Not to say that John Williams didn't knock it out of the park with the other three. This movie especially, I would say that's probably my favorite Indiana Jones score of all the movies. I mean, the other two movies, soundtrack-wise, were okay. I don't think it was really John Williams at his best. I think, yeah, maybe it just kind of seemed like even with The Rise of Skywalker, he was kind of going on autopilot and whatnot. So I'm not really that disappointed with John Williams, really ever. I'm usually satisfied with any score he does. But then there are those that are obviously better than others. And up next we have the third Indiana Jones movie, which people with common sense know is actually the last Indiana Jones movies. The other two, especially Dial Density, I mispronounced that. Dial at Destiny, or Dysentery as some call it. That one especially is a horrible movie. It's one of the worst movies of last year. Time travel and aliens, such a horrible, horrible idea. The Indiana Jones franchise is not a good idea at all. I don't know why they would have bothered venturing in that area, but for some reason they thought it was a good idea to do that. So this is my second favorite movie in the franchise. And it does require a second disc. And this is one where it actually makes sense to bring back the Nazis. Not like in Dial of Dysentery, where we're just bringing back Nazis again because we don't know what else to do. At least Kingdom of the Crystal Skull had the Soviets, which would have been a much better fit to just use again. But no, we have to just keep taking the Nazis. We just have to keep using the Nazis. For some reason. If they brought back the Nazis, I feel like this movie and Raiders were probably the only time we ever really needed to see the Nazis in an Indiana Jones movie, because otherwise, we had, the Tribal Death Cult in Temple of Doom, which is a nice touch. We had the Soviet Union and Crystal Skull, which while that movie is terrible, it made sense to include the Soviet Union. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know why they'd bring back the Nazis again. It just kind of seemed really, really stupid. You really could have done anything else, but no, we had to use Nazis again. So moving on to the last of my LaserDiscs so far, we have the movie Nixon. And as you can see, Anthony Hopkins plays the crook of the movie, I guess. So I did like this movie for what it was trying to accomplish. There are many instances in here where it seems like there's some funny editing, and you kind of wonder why they do that. I think it was a director, Oliver Stone. He wanted to do, make an imitation, I guess, was it the Kuleshov effect, I think it was called, from Soviet cinema back in the 1920s and 30s, is what he was trying to do. So there's that. And unfortunately, this is a movie in my LaserDisc collection that unfortunately doesn't really work the best. I think maybe there's some laser rot, and somebody didn't really take good care of it when they had this movie at one point, so it makes me wonder whether the $8 on this thing was worth spending. Because the first disc, there's obviously some laser rot, and the second side, it goes maybe 75% of the way before just shutting off. It just doesn't function. So there's at least 10 to 15 minutes of this movie that I've now not seen probably at all. But at least with the second disc, it works okay. And then there's a third disc actually that has some bonus features. And almost an hour's worth of deleted scenes. And as far as Oliver Stone's other movies, I know he did one called JFK, which leans more into conspiracy aspect of the Warren Commission. He also did a George W. Bush comedy, which I've not seen. So I need to get around to those movies. And I think, yeah, this basically makes, I think it's technically a second movie in a presidential trilogy, you could call it. Well, otherwise, that's about it for my LaserDisc movies. So I guess that makes CEDs, and it makes LaserDiscs at this point. So I guess I'm going to have to figure out which one I'm going to show off next. I only have one video CD. It's Happy Gilmore, so I don't really need to show off that a whole bunch. I'm trying to acquire some HD DVDs, which I've also not gone around to. So hopefully when school starts to slow down, I can get some of those and then I can show those off. Otherwise, I might move to the VHS stuff next. I think there's like 150 tapes, and it's going to make for a long video. And then some of my DVDs and Blu-rays are at school anyway, so they wouldn't all be in my house, and there's a lot more of those. So I might wait to do those maybe much later in the summer. So I'll probably do VHS next. Oh yeah, I'll also have beta, but there's only like 7 movies on it, 8 if you count the head cleaner. So it's nothing worth doing a video on now. But yeah, otherwise that's all I really have for today. So otherwise, have a good day and see ya.